book 35 last time. So book 34 is Henry Marsh, Admissions, A Life in Brain Surgery. So this is about a surgeon who is talking about kind of like his life as a surgeon and also like his life at the time, like outside of surgery. It made me feel really, really guilty because he talks about how he went over to another country that doesn't have the medical care that we have here, and how a lot of kind of tumours that they had in their brain had got really, really big and had adverse effects because they couldn't get them treated quick enough, and that they'd walked for like days to get seen by him. And how we kind of take that for granted in our country, like, you know, if we think, oh, we've got a brain tumour, we'll just go and get it cut out or whatever, whereas other people don't have that kind of like option. So it's really, really a luxury. In fact, I put here they walked for 5 days to get seen by him as a doctor. And it kind of made me think about how we've got the NHS and we take it so for granted. Like, if any of us ever had any issues like that, we know that we'd be taken care of, but people in other countries just don't have, you know, that. You know, even places like America where it's insurance funded, like, you know, if you don't have insurance, then you're buggered, aren't you? You're going to die. And also I put here that most doctors work on probabilities. They never actually know like if someone's going to work or not. It's like, it's just there's a higher chance if we do this operation that you'll live, than if we don't do it, then you're definitely going to die. So that was a little bit worrying. But he does talk a little bit, I don't know, I said a little bit, quite a lot about his personal life, which I was less interested in really. So he's talking about how he kind of bought a little house and was like doing it up by a canal and it kept getting vandalised. But I wasn't really interested in that really. That sounds really bad, doesn't it? So yeah, I've put it was pitched at the level of the layperson, and therefore lacked any challenge or intellectual stimulation for me really. So, you know, it was talking about like the brain stuff because he's a brain surgeon, but it wasn't in that much detail, so it was okay. Book 33 was Carl Jung, Memories, Dreams and Reflections. So I'm really, really interested by Carl Jung's theories, particularly the collective unconscious and like archetypes and stuff like that, and how they are embedded in our like fairy tales and stories that we tell each other. So I was kind of, I got this book because I wanted to find out more about that. I'd read like an introduction to Carl Jung before, but it wasn't from his perspective. I always find that people that are talking about him, like Jordan Peterson, always kind of talk about it. I'm like, yeah, I really agree with what Carl Jung is saying. He's onto something there that's not really been uncovered because it's not very scientific. But when I was listening to him speak, it was like, I think, what if I put here? It was 16 hours of audio that I listened to, and it literally could have been condensed into 45 minutes. Like, it was really kind of drawn out and really not as interesting as I thought it was going to be. So I think in future I'm just going to read what other people have taken from him, because it's like, you know, when you read like Aristotle or Plato, and it's really, really long-winded, and other people like interpret it and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense and that's really cool. Carl Jung is the same. It's like, it's only what other people have got from it that is actually of use, in terms of understanding like human psyche or whatever. So it must be in there, but I just don't have the tools to kind of interpret it in the way that I think other people interpret it, unless it's just not the right bit of his, you know, what he's done. So yeah, very dense, very kind of difficult to take from it anything of use. So I wouldn't advise listening to that. Book 32 was The Game by Neil Strauss. In about 2010 maybe, I had a friend who basically, we were at like a bar, club, bar, pub kind of place, mixed group of friends, and there was quite a few girls that were sat around. Obviously I was one of them, and there was a few guys with us and stuff as well, and this guy came over and tried to like talk to us as a group. And we were like, this is a bit weird, there's just one random guy that's come up to try and talk to the whole group, that's a bit odd. I knew we were talking to him and whatever, and most of us had boyfriends at the time, so we were like, you know, obviously not interested in talking to him in the way that he was trying to talk to us. And when he went away, one of my friends was like, he's just tried some methods from the game. So this book, the game, was like prolific amongst quite young guys, and I didn't really know kind of much about it, but he'd explained to me the prospect of negging someone, which is to say a negative thing about someone to put them on a little bit of the offensive, so that then that would make them feel a bit insecure, and then you'd be more likely to like hit it off with that person. I was like, that's bizarre. And I was thinking, if somebody ever did that to me, like I would not be impressed by that, and I would not be okay with that. Like I would find that quite offensive. And actually I was in a bar like recently, and a guy tried to do it to me and this girl that I was with, and I ended up just shooting him down because I was like, who the hell do you think you're talking to? Like don't like make out like I'm the stupid one here, when it was him that was being an idiot. So it doesn't work with me, and I knew that it wouldn't work with me, but this whole book is all about like this really kind of nerdy guy trying to get women, trying to get laid, if you will, and he has like, he's basically a man-child. He's basically kind of living in a frat house with other guys that are doing this game, and he's trying to get women, and it's working. He is actually sleeping with people, but he's never getting like a loving relationship with anybody, and never kind of getting anything deep and meaningful from any relationships that he's having. But he thinks that he's a success because he's sleeping with loads of people, and I just kind of think to myself, yeah, okay, your techniques might work to sleep with someone, but it's not hard. Like you could literally just go up to someone who you find attractive and go, do you want to come back to mine, and they'll probably say yes. Like it's not difficult to pull somebody, but he seems to make it out like he's got to do all these techniques and stuff, and what he's not realising is that it's his confidence and the fact that he's talking to somebody that is getting him laid, not the fact that it's these tools of the game. It's really, really derogatory to women, it's really misogynistic, and I was just reading it going, this guy is an absolute tool. So, you know, don't read it, don't use those techniques, like just be a nice person and have a personality, you know, be respectful. Like that will get you much further in the dating game. So that was awful. Book 31 was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. So a lot of these books are like from the business literature, and they're from quite a while ago, so I don't know if they are as applicable nowadays as what they probably were back then, because it's very Americanized as well. And to be honest with you, I can't actually remember having read this, so I read this back in July. So it says okay, so habit 1 is talking about how people are very reactive to things and try and become like a victim and have like a kind of blame culture, and that if you want to be effective you need to get over that. Like if something's going wrong and you don't like it, don't complain about it, like do something about it and you will be more effective. So that's fair enough, that makes sense. Habit 2 is talking about how you should, if you want to be a leader, work from your values. Like don't be looking around at the opinions of other people and what they think. Like just go, like work from your values, and then you'll be able to lead people because you'll be passionate and you'll be like effective in that way. Habit 3 is talking about how you need to assess what's being externally demanded from you and what is the things that you have to do personally, because a lot of us have things that we want to do and goals that we want to do, but because of all the external pressure and all the external demands and jobs that we have to do from other people, that bogs us down and we don't become effective because we're trying to get rid of all that stuff before we do what we want to do. Whereas actually you should focus more on what you want to do and then kind of keep that stuff at bay, but focus more on what otherwise you won't get anywhere because you're constantly trying to get rid of this flow that you won't get any time for that. And I think that is something that a lot of us probably feel. Habit 4 is challenging the scarcity principle, so the feeling of I've got to get it because there's not very much of it, or like I've got to get that job because, you know, it's rare, no one else, you know, everyone else is going to get that job basically. It's kind of like thinking the job's for everybody. You know, things aren't scarce in that sense, so we don't have that kind of culture of I've got to have it before everybody else. And the thing about as well, like not being able to celebrate someone else's success because you want to be successful, when in actual fact everyone can be successful, and you should share that and celebrate that, and not think because someone else is successful that means there's no more success for you. Like, you know, this scarcity thing is like in our minds. Habit 5 discusses how many people are listened to respond and care more about being understood and communicating their own thoughts, that they don't listen to other people's. If you want to be an effective person, you've got to listen to everybody and understand other people before you want them to understand you. And I think that our culture is kind of going down that view of, you know, everybody wants to be popular, friends, have people there for them, but they don't want to do those things for other people. It's similar in a work culture. You know, you can't expect respect from other people if you don't respect them. You can't expect people to, you know, do favours for you if you don't do favours for them. So it's kind of like that reciprocal idea of, if you want to be effective, you've kind of got to do things first and not wait for other people to do it. Habit 6 is about synergy, so working on the back of that. You know, you can get both of a person's needs met if you kind of work for each other. It's like more about working effectively with each other so each person gets what they want. And you can actually help bolster each other up by doing that, rather than trying to be above someone. If you work together, you'll both go up. And then habit 7, I thought was my favourite, as it described a story of a man soaring down a tree, and passers-by asked how long they had been doing it for, and the man replies for hours, and the passerby asks why doesn't he sharpen the sword, because then it will cut better and it won't take as much time. And he turns around and says, I don't have time to sharpen the saw. I think a lot of the times that's what we do. We're working flat out, that we don't realise that our saw is getting blunt, you know, more blunt, and we don't take the time out to sharpen the saw. Whereas if we took that time, we'd actually get it done quicker and we'd be more productive. And so it's that kind of idea of working smart, building in breaks, building in things that make us more effective, more reflective. So I guess actually, on reflection, it was quite an alright book because, you know, that does sound alright, because I can't remember it, that's why I started off quite thinking about it. But it's not rocket science, is it really? I think a lot of the things that we discussed were a bit obvious, but those kind of books are really good reminders of what you should kind of be doing, and if you are already doing them, they make you feel quite good, because you're like, yeah, I'm doing all that stuff already, that's probably why I'm a highly effective person. Or the opposite, these are the things that I need to do, or focus on more, or maybe not do that so much, or whatever, to become more highly effective. So yeah, it was good for that sense. The next book was book 30, which was The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer. I have absolutely no idea what this one was about, so this was in July, so let me read it. So this is talking about how there's a distinction between who you actually are and the voice that's in your head that tells you who you are. So that we tell ourselves a lot of stories. I'm shy, I don't like doing this, I don't like doing that, I'm not very good at this, I'm not very good at that. But actually they're not true. We just tell ourselves those things and we don't really test those or break through those, and because we've had them all our life, we don't really think about how maybe they're not right, and that we should be telling ourselves a different story. It's basically suggesting that our thoughts are a module that overlay our consciousness, which they've done neuroscience studies and actually found that that is the case. Like, this thought process that's going on in your mind, you can turn it off. Like, people who meditate, and I can't hear my thoughts most of the time, I have to speak them out loud because I've got to the point where there's stuff going on but I don't know what it is because I can't hear it, I've turned it down. But I'd obviously then do, if I tune into it, I can hear it. So it's like, for me, I've got the opposite problem, I can't hear anything, but other people hear things all the time. But you can turn that voice off or down, or, you know, so that it's not there as much anymore, and that makes you a little bit more present when you're talking to other people. He's suggesting that you can't trust your thoughts. So, you know, you have thoughts all the time that are intrusive, some are quite negative. they're not you, they're not who you are deep down, and especially if you've got an opposition to what you're thinking, then that's definitely not you, because the opposition wouldn't be there. So it's about kind of maybe being a little bit easier on yourself and thinking, actually, okay, yeah, you've had that crazy thought, but that doesn't mean you're crazy, like your thoughts are separate to you. And also he talks about how your emotions are also another module that isn't you either. So like you've got your thoughts, you've got your emotions, and you're in the middle, and you're kind of trying to process that, the inputs that's happening from them, and how your thoughts can misinterpret the emotions based on past things, and you know, how you're entitled to have an emotion to something that doesn't make sense. But it's about recognising, you know, if you go into a situation and you think, oh, I'm quite anxious in this situation, that's interesting. Allowing yourself to be that rather than going, why are you like that? I need to find out why you're like that. It's kind of a bit more about just recognising it. He explains that suffering is simply your resistance to what is, and that you can choose to either accept it and therefore be unaffected by it. Like you can decide, okay, this is the way it is. Like if I am opposing to it all the time, I'm going to suffer more than if I just accept the way it is. So it's about kind of like letting go of that. He suggests that we have samsaras, which is scars on the heart due to blocked energies, and that we have resisted and not allowed to flow through us. So every time you have a resistance to something and you block that flow of energy, you get a samsara, which is a scar on your heart. So unless you accept something and let it go, then it's always going to be there. It's always going to block that energy from flowing between people, between like the world and Joe. It's a very spiritual kind of book, but it talks a lot of sense if you kind of are a bit iffy about stuff like that, if you see past that. It says all experiences stimulate spiritual growth, and thus you should not resist it. It's kind of that kind of push and pull between your ego and who you are underneath, you know, what you present to the world, who you are underneath, the good parts of you, the bad parts of you. It's almost like trying to break down your modules so that you can do something about them, and so you can come out of them rather than being an overlay over you. So it was interesting in a kind of spiritual kind of way. Book 29 was How Not to Be a Boy by Robert Webb. This had got a lot of kind of media attention because it was all about you know, like gender stereotypes of what's considered to be a boy, what's considered to be a girl, and how actually that's really detrimental to both boys and girls. And I think a lot of the media is kind of not understanding the detriment that strong women kind of movement is having on men, and how they don't know how to be anymore. It's like if you're masculine, then that's toxic, and if you're not masculine, then you don't get women. And it's kind of like, what are they supposed to be like? Like, what are women trying to make men into? Like, why can't you just accept a person for the traits that they have? Like, why is it wrong to be a certain way and right to be another way? Like, you know, it's kind of like having more detriment, I think, than not at this particular time. Before it obviously the wave will kind of improve and stuff, but at the minute it's like almost like flipping the patriarchy into matriarchy, which I completely disagree with. That as against any feminism that I'm aware of. Like, feminism is equal rights, it's not about making it a matriarchy. So I think that, you know, the media attention that it got, I was interested to kind of, you know, read about it, and it's a comedian, so I thought it'd be quite funny. And honestly, it was rubbish, it was really rubbish, and I was like, I was expecting it to be so much more than it was. Like, he's literally a man-child, like he's never grown up, and he's like, you know, talking about being with his wife, and how his wife is basically his substitute mum now. Like, he's not grown up at all, and it's almost like he's trying to be funny, and it's like he's really not funny. It's like trying to be slapstick, and it's just, it's not very witty, it's not very humorous at all. It kind of touches on like gender stereotypes and stuff, but literally touches. And I've put here that it was very laddie, so it was very like, oh, I'm one of the lads kind of, you know, behaviour, and he talks like that, and I think he's still like that as a man, and his, you know, and his wife is accepting of him being like that, because I think she's quite childish and quite, you know, like that. I've put here, unfortunately wrote in the style of man-child. Yeah, he did.